The crystal chandeliers of Levaudor cast golden light across white tablecloths, illuminating the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Waiters in pressed black vests glided between tables, where Boston's elite cut into $40 steaks and discussed summer homes in the Hamptons. Elena Vasquez checked her reflection in the brass door handle before entering. Her black dress was simple, a thrift store find she'd spent 2 weekends altering, but it fit her perfectly. Her mother had taught her that, "You don't need expensive clothes, Mia. You need clothes that fit." She spotted Braden immediately. He was standing by the host stand, his Balenciaga jacket 2 sizes too large, the logo splashed across his back like a billboard. When he saw her, he grinned and waved her over with the enthusiasm of a game show host. "Baby, over here." Several heads turned. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks as she crossed the dining room toward him. "You look incredible," Braden said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. He kissed her cheek, leaving behind the chemical sweetness of his cologne. "Ready to see how the other half lives?" The other half. Elena had heard him use that phrase a dozen times in the 6 months they'd been dating. As if wealth were a country and he was offering her a tourist visa. "The reservation is under Cole," Braden told the maître, a thin French man whose name tag read Henry. "I requested the center table. Better lighting for photos." Something flickered across Henry's face. Recognition, perhaps, or warning, but he simply nodded and led them through the dining room. Elena noticed everything. The way Braden's eyes swept the room to see who was watching. The way he pulled out her chair with theatrical flourish, making sure nearby diners observed his chivalry. The way he immediately snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. A gesture that made Elena flinch. "Just get through tonight," she told herself. Maybe he's nervous. Maybe he's trying too hard. But somewhere beneath the excuses, a quieter voice whispered, "You know exactly what kind of man he is. You've known for months." At a corner booth, partially hidden by a marble pillar, Julian Thorne looked up from his book. He came to Levaudor every Thursday evening, same booth, same worn copy of The Great Gatsby, same glass of wine he nursed for hours. It was his ritual, his escape from the suffocating weight of the Thorne name and all it demanded. The building belonged to his family, had belonged to them since his great-grandfather bought the entire block during the Depression. But Julian never mentioned this to the staff. He preferred anonymity, the rare luxury of being no one important. Tonight, however, his attention kept drifting from Gatsby's green light to the couple at the center table. The man was obvious. Julian had known his type at prep school, at Harvard, at every charity gala his mother had ever dragged him to. Men who wore wealth like armor, loud and desperate and ultimately hollow. The oversized designer jacket, the theatrical gestures, the way he treated the servers like furniture. But the girl. Julian leaned forward slightly. He knew her. Not personally, but he knew of her. She was Rosa's daughter. Rosa, his mother's housekeeper for 15 years, who made empanadas that tasted like home, and who had once sat with him in the kitchen until 3 in the morning when he was 16 and heartbroken, telling him stories until the pain felt bearable. Rosa spoke of her daughter constantly. "Elena is studying for her certification. Elena works at the library. Elena got her GED while working 2 jobs. The pride in Rosa's voice was so pure, so unwavering, that Julian had constructed an image of this Elena in his mind. Studious, determined, probably serious. The girl at the table was serious, yes, but there was something else in her expression. Something that looked like resignation. She was smiling at her date, laughing at his jokes. But her eyes kept drifting to the menu, to the exit, to anywhere but the man across from her. Julian recognized that look. He'd seen it on his own face, in mirrors, at events where he was expected to perform a version of himself that didn't exist. "Not my business," he told himself, returning to his book. She's an adult. She can make her own choices. He managed to read half a page before the noise from the center table made him look up again. The sommelier had arrived. He was a thin man with a thin mustache and an expression that suggested he'd been born looking down at people. His name tag read Marcel. "Monsieur Cole," Marcel began, "have you had a chance to review our wine selection?" "Don't need to." Braden leaned back, spreading his arms wide. "Bring me the most expensive wine you've got. I want my girl here to know what class tastes like." Elena's stomach dropped. Braden, that's really not. Shh, babe. He patted her hand without looking at her. Let me handle this. Marcel's eyebrow rose by approximately 1 millimeter. Monsieur is certain? Our reserves include some rather substantial selections. Did I stutter? Very well. Marcel's smile was thin. Might I suggest the Chateau Petrus, 1989? An exceptional Pomerol. The bottle is $5,000, though we also offer it by the glass at $500. $500. Elena heard the number and felt the room tilt slightly. $500 was a month of groceries, 3 weeks of work at the library. We'll take 2 glasses, Braden said. One for me, one for the lady. Braden. Elena kept her voice low. I don't even like wine. Please. Nonsense. He was already looking around the room, checking who was watching. You've never had good wine. Trust me, after tonight, you'll never want to go back to that cheap stuff. Marcel disappeared toward the wine cellar. Elena sat very still, trying to calculate how much this evening was going to cost, trying to understand why Braden thought this was romantic instead of reckless. Relax, Braden said, misreading her expression. This is your Cinderella moment. Cinderella, Elena thought, didn't have to worry about her prince's credit limit. The wine arrived with ceremony. Marcel cradled the bottle like an infant, presenting the label to Braden with the gravity of a priest displaying a sacred relic. Chateau Petrus, 1989, one of the finest vintages of the century. Braden barely glanced at it. Yeah, pour it. From his corner booth, Julian watched what happened next with growing dismay. Braden grabbed the glass wrong, wrapping his whole hand around the bowl instead of holding the stem. Even from 30 feet away, Julian could see the warmth of his palm heating the wine. Then Braden swirled the glass, fast and aggressive, like he was mixing a cocktail. Wine splashed over the rim, landing on the white tablecloth like a blood stain. Oops, Braden laughed. Slippery little thing. He threw back the tasting pour in a single gulp. No sniffing, no savoring, and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "'S good, pour my girl some." Elena accepted her glass carefully, holding it by the stem the way she'd seen people do in movies. She took a small sip. It tasted like wine, red, dry, vaguely fruity. She couldn't tell if it was worth $500 or 5. See? Braden beamed. I told you, stick with me and this is your life. Elena smiled because she didn't know what else to do. The meal progressed. Braden ordered a 7-course tasting menu for himself and talked without pause about his startup, his investors, his trust fund that was tied up in legal stuff, his connections in the Diamond District. Elena nodded at appropriate intervals and did math in her head. 2 glasses of wine, $1,000. Braden's tasting menu, $350. Her salad, $45. Tax and tip, another $200 probably. $1,500, more than she earned in a month. Hey, Braden snapped his fingers in front of her face. You listening? Sorry, yes, you were talking about cryptocurrency? His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression, a flicker of panic quickly masked. Hang on, gotta take this, investor stuff. He stood and walked toward the foyer, phone pressed to his ear. Elena watched him go and something cold settled in her stomach. Julian had given up pretending to read. He watched Braden pace near the entrance, watched the increasingly frantic gestures of a man receiving very bad news. The body language was unmistakable. Argument, desperation, panic. Then, moving so casually that Julian almost missed it, Braden ended his call, glanced back toward the dining room, and walked out the front door. Not toward the restroom, not toward the coat check. Out. No. Julian was on his feet before he could think, then made himself sit back down. Made himself watch. Because maybe he was wrong. Maybe Braden was just getting something from his car. Maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve abandoning a girl with a bill she couldn't possibly pay. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. Through the window, Julian caught a flash of red, a sports car pulling away from the curb, accelerating into the night. That bastard. Across the room, Elena's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something worse. Understanding. She knew. On some level, she'd always known. The maitre d' was already moving toward her table, billfolder in hand. Julian watched her face as Henri delivered what must have been devastating news. Watched the color drain from her cheeks. Watched her pull out her phone and call once, twice, 3 times. Watched Henri lean closer, his posture shifting from professional to predatory. Julian set down his book and began to stand. Then Elena did something that stopped him cold. "Your companion has departed." Henry's voice was flat. "The bill is $1,563. How will you be paying?" Elena stared at the number. The letters blurred, swam, reformed into something monstrous. "I can't. I don't have." "Then I'm afraid we have a problem." Henry's smile was thin. "Theft of services is a criminal matter in Massachusetts. I can involve the police, or wait." The word came out hoarse. "Just wait." Elena's mind was racing, fragments of panic colliding with something else, something buried, something she'd almost forgotten. She looked at the wine bottle, the empty Petrus, standing like an accusation on the white tablecloth. And suddenly she was 17 again, standing in the wine cellar of the Thorne estate, summer, 3 years earlier. Her mother was recovering from hip surgery, and Mrs. Thorne had allowed Elena to help in the estate's library, cataloging books, organizing documents, earning money for textbooks. One afternoon, she'd wandered into the wine cellar and found a stern German man named Klaus examining bottles under a magnifying lamp. "You have the eye," he'd said when she asked what he was doing. "What do you see?" "The label looks new. The texture is wrong." Klaus had smiled, rare for him, and spent the rest of the summer teaching her paper composition, ink degradation, cork specifications. The art of detecting counterfeits in a world where a single bottle could be worth more than a car. In the wine world, he'd told her once, knowledge is the only currency that matters. Anyone can buy a bottle. Only an expert can tell if it's real. Elena picked up the Petrus bottle. "Put that down," Henry snapped. "No." Her voice was steadier now, the panic giving way to something colder. "I need to look at something." She turned the bottle in her hands, tilting it toward the candlelight. Ran her finger along the edge of the label, examined the embossed numbers at the base. Her heart began to pound, but not from fear this time. "I won't be paying for this wine," she said quietly, "because this wine is fake." Henry laughed. "Don't be ridiculous." "The label," Elena pointed. "Chateau Petrus uses paper with cotton fiber. It has a specific texture, slightly rough. This label is smooth, laser printed, modern." She tilted the bottle further. "And the glass. Every bottle is embossed with a production code. This one says 03, which means this bottle was manufactured in 2003. She set it down with a decisive thunk. "How does wine from 1989 end up in a bottle made 14 years later?" The color drained from Henry's face. "You're lying." "Am I?" Elena's voice didn't waver. "You've been selling counterfeit wine at $5,000 a bottle. That's fraud, a felony. So no, Monsieur Henry, I won't be paying. And you won't be calling the police, because if anyone should be worried about law enforcement tonight, it's you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Henry's mouth opened and closed. His composure cracked, just for a moment, revealing something ugly underneath, the look of a man who'd been caught. "You insolent." He reached for Elena's arm. "Security." "I wouldn't do that." The voice came from behind Elena, quiet, calm, carrying an authority that had nothing to do with volume. She turned. Julian Thorne stood a few feet away. In one hand, he held the cork from her table. In the other, a wine glass he'd been nursing all evening. "The young lady is correct," he said, examining the cork with practiced ease. "Petrus corks are 54 millimeters long, hand-burned with the Chateau's mark. This one is 45 millimeters, with a printed stamp that smells of industrial ink." He looked up at Henry. "Would you like to explain that?" Henry's face went from pale to ashen. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't realize. My family owns this building." Julian's tone remained conversational, almost pleasant. "We lease it to Laveau d'Or under strict provisions regarding reputation and legal compliance. Selling counterfeit wine at premium prices violates both." He pulled out his phone. "I've just messaged our legal counsel. He'll be contacting the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission tomorrow. I've also copied my mother, who handles our real estate holdings personally." He pocketed the phone. "She's particular about reputation. I imagine she'll want to discuss your business practices in detail." Henry looked like he might faint. "Now." Julian's eyes fixed on the matron with cold precision. "I believe you were about to apologize to Miss Vasquez and void her bill." For a moment, Henry seemed ready to argue, then his shoulders slumped. "My apologies, mademoiselle." The words came out strangled. There appears to have been a misunderstanding. Your bill has been voided. He retreated toward the kitchen, clutching the bill folder like a lifeline. Elena stood very still, her heart pounding. Julian Thorne was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, "may I buy you a cup of coffee? I think we should talk." They found a cafe 3 blocks away, mismatched chairs, exposed brick, the warm smell of roasting beans. Julian ordered black coffee. Elena did the same because she was too overwhelmed to think clearly. They sat by the window watching rain begin to fall, saying nothing for a long moment. "You know who I am," Julian said finally. It wasn't a question. "Your mother employs my mother, Rosa Vasquez." "I know." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Rosa makes the best empanadas I've ever tasted. She talks about you constantly. She mentions you too." Elena wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Says you work too hard. Says you're too thin." She's right on both counts. The rain picked up, streaking the window in silver rivers. Elena watched the patterns form and dissolve. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Step in, I had it handled." "I know." Julian tilted his head. "That's what I wanted to ask about. How did you know? That the wine was fake?" Elena hesitated. The honest answer felt too personal. "Your wine cellar," she said finally. 3 years ago, when my mother was recovering, there was a man, Klaus Brenner, our wine curator, retired last year. He taught me. I was supposed to be cataloging documents, but I kept wandering into the cellar." She shrugged. "He caught me examining bottles. Instead of being angry, he started explaining things. I guess he was lonely." Klaus was always selective about who he taught. Julian studied her. "He must have seen something in you. A good memory, that's all." "That's not all." Julian leaned forward. "I watched you tonight. I watched you put up with a man who treated you like a prop. I watched him abandon you with a bill you couldn't pay. I watched you panic, and then I watched you stop panicking and think your way out." He paused. "Memory is a skill, but what you did tonight was character." Elena didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken about her like that, like she was worth paying attention to. "I should pay you back," she managed. "For the food at least. The wine was fake, but I did eat." "No, I insist. Elena?" He held up a hand. "May I call you Elena?" She nodded. "You don't owe me anything. If anything, I owe you. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it would have been if news got out that a building my family owns was running a wine fraud scheme? You didn't just save yourself tonight. You potentially saved the Thorne name." Elena wasn't sure she believed that, but something in his expression suggested he did. "Since you're uncomfortable accepting help," Julian continued, "let me offer you something else, a trade." "What kind of trade?" "My family has a collection. Wine, documents, artifacts dating back generations. That needs to be cataloged and authenticated. Klaus was supposed to do it, but his health declined before he could finish. We've interviewed a dozen candidates since then, all with fancy degrees. None of them saw what you saw tonight." Elena's heart beat faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we have an opening for an archival specialist, full-time, $60,000 a year plus benefits." He paused. "I'm not offering because you're Rosa's daughter. I'm offering because you're the first person I've met who actually knows the difference between real and fake." $60,000. The number was almost incomprehensible. "You don't know anything about me," she said slowly. "I don't have a degree. I know you work at a library while taking night classes. I know you altered that dress yourself. The stitching is too neat to be factory work. I know you ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, even though your date was trying to impress you." Julian smiled. "I know Rosa talks about you constantly, and Rosa is the best judge of character I've ever met." Elena opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "I'm not asking you to decide now," he said. "Think about it. If you're interested, come to the estate Monday morning at 9. He stood, leaving a 20 on the table. "Thank you," Elena managed. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet." He paused at the door. "Thank me when you figured out what you want your life to look like, because I think you're about to find out you have more options than you ever imagined." Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain. Elena sat alone with her cold coffee and her racing thoughts, and a future that suddenly looked nothing like it had 3 hours ago. 6 months later, the Gilded Quill Society met in a restored carriage house in Back Bay. exposed beams, original brick, the smell of old books, and serious money. Elena stood at a small podium, facing 40 people whose combined net worth could fund a small country. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled up her first slide. "You can do this," she told herself. "You know this material. You've lived with it for 6 months." In the back of the room, Julian leaned against the wall, watching her with quiet confidence. It was the faith that steadied her. "Good evening," Elena began. "My name is Elena Vasquez, and I'm the archival specialist for the Thorn Heritage Foundation. Tonight, I'd like to share a discovery that has fundamentally changed our understanding of early American maritime history." She spoke for 30 minutes, about hidden letters, invisible ink, trade routes that predated documented history. She answered questions from collectors who'd been studying documents since before she was born. She held her ground. When the applause died down, she was surrounded by people who wanted to shake her hand, to discuss her research, to offer opportunities she'd never imagined. But her eyes kept drifting to the back of the room. Julian wasn't there. She found him on the terrace, watching city lights flicker against the autumn sky. "You were brilliant," he said without turning. "Margaret Chen asked 3 times if you were available for consulting work." "What did you tell her?" "That you'd have to discuss it with your employer." Elena moved to stand beside him. "And what does my employer think?" Julian turned. Something in his expression made her breath catch, something warm and tentative, and just a little afraid. "Your employer thinks you're extraordinary. Your employer has thought so for 6 months." He paused. "Your employer has no idea what to do with that information." "Julian," Elena stepped closer. "What is this? What are we?" "I don't know." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Every time I think I have an answer, you do something that proves I have no idea what I'm talking about. That makes 2 of us." She was close enough now to feel warmth radiating from him, close enough to see the faint lines around his eyes from too many late nights. "I should tell you something," Julian said, "the night we met at Le Vaudor." "What about it?" "I didn't just happen to be there. Rosa mentioned you were going on a date. She was worried about the man." He exhaled. "So I made sure I was there, just in case." Elena stared at him. "You were watching out for me?" "For Rosa's daughter. I didn't know." He started again. "I didn't know you would turn out to be the most remarkable person I've ever met." Elena kissed him. It wasn't dramatic, no swelling music, no falling rain, just 2 people who'd been circling each other for months finally closing the distance. When they pulled apart, Julian looked stunned. "Well," he said, "that answers that." "Answers what?" "Whether you felt the same." Elena laughed, real and free. "Julian Thorne, I have felt this way since you quoted Cork specifications at a maitre d'. You are the strangest person I've ever met." "Is that a compliment?" "The highest one I know." A commotion near the entrance caught Elena's attention. Braden Cole was arguing with security. He looked worse than she remembered, clothes wrinkled, hair unkempt, desperation in his voice. "I'm supposed to be on the list." "Check again." "Braden Cole." "Sir, you're on our restricted access list." "Restricted? Do you know who I am?" Julian's hand found Elena's. "Want me to handle this?" "No." She was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I'll do it." She crossed the terrace and stopped a few feet from where Braden argued with the guard. He turned. Surprise, recognition, calculation, fear, all of it crossing his face in sequence. "Elena? What are you?" "Hello, Braden." She kept her tone neutral. "I work here." His eyes darted past her to Julian. Understanding dawned. "You're with him? The Thorne guy?" "I'm with myself, but yes, Mr. Thorne is my colleague." She paused. "And my friend. Your friend." His laugh was brittle. "Did you tell your friend what you did to me? How you ruined my life?" "I didn't do anything to you. You ordered wine you couldn't pay for. You abandoned someone. Those were your choices. The wine was fake. You said so. It was, which made you a victim of fraud too. The difference is I didn't run and leave someone else to take the blame." Braden's face twisted. "You don't understand. I had debts, people after me." "I understand perfectly." Elena's voice was calm, but steel ran beneath it. "You were scared, so you sacrificed someone else? I was the easy target. The housekeeper's daughter in a thrift store dress." She stepped closer. "The difference is, I didn't need anyone to believe me. I had knowledge, and knowledge doesn't care about your designer jacket or your rented sports car. It only cares about what's true. Braden deflated. All the bluster, all the performance, gone. Fine, he said. You win. I don't win anything, Elena shook her head. I never wanted anything from you except honesty. You couldn't give me that. So this isn't about winning. It's about moving on. She turned and walked back toward Julian, toward the future she'd built from nothing but determination and a good memory. Behind her, she heard the guard's voice. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. She didn't look back. 1 year later, the letter arrived on a Tuesday in an envelope stamped with Harvard University's seal. Elena stared at it for a long moment. Well? Rosa stood in the doorway of Elena's office, her office in the Thorne estate, with tall windows and organized shelves and framed certificates on the wall. Are you going to open it? I'm preparing myself. For what? You already know what it says. I don't know anything. Elena slid her finger under the flap. Dear Miss Vasquez, on behalf of the Department of History of Science, I am delighted to inform you of your admission to the PhD program. The rest blurred as tears filled her eyes. I got in, she whispered. Mama, I got in. Rosa wrapped her arms around her daughter. For a moment, they were just mother and child, two women who had worked and sacrificed, watching their hopes come true. Go find that boy, Rosa said, wiping her eyes. He should be here for this. Elena found Julian in the library, exactly where Rosa predicted. He looked up when she entered. His face transformed when he saw her expression. You got in. I got in. He crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted her off her feet. I knew it. His voice was muffled against her hair. I knew they'd see what I see. What's that? Someone extraordinary. He set her down, cupping her face in his hands. Someone who looks at the world and sees what everyone else misses. Elena thought about that night, over a year ago. The restaurant, the wine, the bill she couldn't pay. The fear and shame and terrible certainty that her life was falling apart. You know what I've realized? She said. What? That night wasn't the worst night of my life. It was the night everything changed. The night I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me and started rescuing myself. Julian smiled, the real one, the one that crinkled his eyes. And the wine? The wine was fake. Elena laughed. But what came after was the realest thing that's ever happened to me. Outside the window, spring was arriving, trees budding, flowers blooming, the world shaking off winter. Elena Vasquez, daughter of a housekeeper, girl in a thrift store dress, future doctor of history, watched the seasons change and thought about all the documents still waiting to be discovered. All the fakes still waiting to be exposed. She had started with nothing but a good memory and a mother who taught her to walk like she belonged. She had ended up with everything. Thank you for staying until the end. If Elena's journey touched your heart, her courage to rise when everything fell apart, her refusal to be defined by those who underestimated her, then you understand why stories like this matter. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, because every day we bring you more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Stories that remind us your background doesn't determine your future. Knowledge is power, and sometimes the moment everything falls apart is the moment everything truly begins. See you in the next story.